Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Sunday afternoon in the shop. Holy crap, so much has been done. I mean, so much has been done that this thing is almost ready for covering. So, ugh, I have done so much work. Um, haven't really been myself lately, so I've been kind of laying low. Um, Working on this cap, I would say, was good therapy, but not really. This is very stressful. But anywho, enough of that sad story. Where are we at now? Well, we have tail section attached. We have wing fairings that are on there. Oh boy, where to begin? Well, trying to remember where I left off. And I think where I left off, I'm trying to do all this with one hand and not break anything. Bear with me here. Trying to do this without dinging things up since I don't want to sand this thing again. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so last video, I think I had this mount already in there. This one was not. So yes, the wing has been completely mounted. Oh, we'll get into that. So how I did the wing mounts, I think I already went over how this one is here. Just lots of layers of 1/4 inch ply, drilled and tapped a 1/4 20. As you can see, I did it twice because I forgot that I wasn't supposed to do it in the center. I was supposed to do it in the center of this portion. So, whoops, no big deal. The mount in the front, same type of situation. Everything is epoxied into place with tri-stock reinforcement on the bottom. Except on this one, I drilled through the plywood and recessed in a hardwood dowel to use for my bolt threads. And that's because this mount is kind of double duty. It's holding the wing on there, and also it's partially holding my landing gear. So very important that that stays nice and strong. So yeah, before we get into all the other goodness that's happened, you can see we got some cute shapes going on here, all sorts of stuff. We'll come back. So once I got the wing mounted, I had ordered some 3/16 aluminum. Was it 3/16? I don't know. Whatever it was. I ordered some aluminum to make my own gear, but I don't have a way of cutting a taper. As you can see, the gear, tapers to a narrower point as it goes down. I can cut aluminum, no problem, but I don't have a saw to be able to actually cut that taper into it. So I started looking around the shop, and I had a set of landing gear that would work, and were just about the right, perfect size, actually. So I used them, and I just have some blown out awful tires on there that I use just for mock-up. But yeah, so the gear is mounted, which turned out just fine. And as you can see, the gap where the gear sets into now has this nice removable cover, and also the transition piece here from where the fuselage blends into the wing. This whole piece right here, this is one piece right here. And there's 2 Phillips head screws there and there. I take those screws out, this piece pops out. And I'll get into why all this is. So right now, we have 2 440 bolts in the back that hold the wing on. And here and here are 2 440 bolts that pass through this cover, through the landing gear, all the way through the block, and hold the gear to the wing. So right now, it's 4 bolts to pop the wing off. Now, if I want to remove the gear, because now this is a 90-inch wing, it's a 90-inch wing with gear sticking out of it. That takes up some space. That just makes it awkward to store and to transport. So if I want to remove this gear, I take those 2 Phillips head screws out, pop that cover right out of there, and here are 2 shorter 440 bolts because I don't want them going through the wing. Take those bolts out, then the gear legs pop off. So I decided to go that route. I'm pretty sure that's how it was intended per the plans. It was really hard to tell. But yeah, this situation right here took about 10 hours worth of work. Holy mackerel, that took a lot of work. You know, I had nothing to go by, no dimensions, no nothing, just had to, trying to get the focus here, just had to go at it just by looking at a picture of the airplane and going from there. And the cutouts here where the gear comes out are slightly oversized. There's no way the gear would ever actually bend that far, but better safe than sorry. And you can see what I was talking about in the last video. This area right here I filled in with a block because the mount that's in here that's recessed, is longer than the actual gear itself. So that had to get filled in, and of course the cover had to be made. On the back, put a piece of, I don't know, thin plywood, just to act as a little bit of a, nice strong platform for the wing bolts to hold in. And then I blended it into the wing with filler so it doesn't have a step. It's just a nice gradual, it just blends together and looks really good. So the wing is just about ready for covering. Yeah, it's very close. So last week, as well as going into this week and this weekend and even today, so much stuff has been going on. Let me finagle this around yet again. I don't know what you're seeing. I apologize. So, per the full-scale airplane, and even a nice scale model, you can see it has a nice wing fairing right here. And it can be kind of interesting to make something like that, especially when I have nothing really to go by. And there are so many methods for doing this, lots of different products to use, some better than others. Most ways are probably better than the way I did it, but I did it my way for a reason, and let's get into it. So I started by wrapping the center section of the wing with wax paper, bolting the wing up, and then once the wing was on the airplane, just using some tape, I made a reference point on the wing and the side of the fuselage, roughly where that wing fairing had to be. And once that was on there, there's a wood block. There's a piece of wood right here, which is kind of my starting point. You can, terrible lighting, I apologize. But you can see that's just a piece of, on each side there's a piece of wood, and that kind of gives me my starting point for the fairings. And then I just use the super cheap Red Devil spackle. Nothing special, nothing fancy. And for those that don't have these, you need to get some. For spreading filler, I got these on Amazon. They're actually for spreading like icing on cakes, cupcakes and stuff like that. I got a set for like $8. And there's 6 of them that come in a set, all different sizes and lengths. These work fantastic. So I was able just to, scoop a big old dollop of that filler, then just mush it in there. And then once it was on there, start kind of blending it out a little bit. So these fairings, though right now they are basically a composite piece, they're lightweight spackle. That's all they are. Well, that's how they started. Now the downside for using that lightweight spackle is it takes forever to dry. I mean forever. So while it was in the process of drying, I went ahead and did some other things on the airplane. Got the pockets cut out for my elevator servos, mounts put in. Of course, I did all that. Focus. I did all that before I mounted the stab, so it was much easier to do. But yeah, nice clean setup in there. That turned out really nice. And getting back to the topic of the spackle here, this spackle is basically the same as any other product, paint or adhesive. The more you pile on there, the longer it takes to fully cure. So overnight, when I initially did it, I was able to remove the wing, remove the wax paper, and then I hardened the bottom, just the bottom, with some CA because this was very flimsy, very flexible. I didn't want it to break. So I hardened the bottom with CA so I could start sanding on the top without worrying about it breaking. But I was only able to sand a little bit at a time before the the underneath layers started getting exposed and they were still soft. So I would sand a little bit, work on something else, sand a little bit, so forth, so on. But then I finally got it to the point where it was, for the most part, completely dry. Then what I did is turned it over to the bottom, and using just one layer of 6/10 ounce cloth and one coat of thinned down resin, I glassed the bottom. So now, nice and solid. And as you can see, it looks like it's a composite piece, but it is just spackle with a composite shell. And of course, because I did this with the wing on the airplane, it perfectly blends the wing. It blends to the wing just beautifully. So now that the bottom side was glassed, I went ahead and finished shaping the top side. And then once I got it to where I wanted it, I broke it. You can kind of see where there's a crack here that kind of goes through there. So I repaired that, and then I put 2 layers of 6/10 ounce cloth all the way around the part and kind of feathered it about 1/4 inch up into the fuselage. Once that dried, sanded it down. So now I had this fairing just the way I wanted it. It was nice and smooth, but it's still, because I broke it, I had to do a little bit of filling on it. So once I filled it, I took 3 strips of 6/10 ounce cloth per side and glassed them again. So now there's 5 layers of 6/10 ounce on top and 1 layer on the bottom. Sanded that out, put a flow coat on it. Flow coat, blended it into the fuselage just a little bit, not too much. And then last night I put on 1 more layer, just a thin layer of filler, because even once you flow coat something with resin, you're going to get a little bit of a waviness to it. So I did the flow coat and sanded it, and you can see there's a little remnants of filler on there, not much, but now it is smooth. And when we look down these things, they look absolutely fantastic. They're the same on both sides. It really turned out nice. And I had to, I added some filler to the bottom side here and to the back, so everything just comes to a nice point once all this is covered. I mean, I can run my hand on there and really not feel where there's any, parts that came together. It all blends together into one, and once again, solid as a rock. So not only is it a scale feature for the airplane, I was going to just not do it, but it adds so much to the airplane. It really does. Having those fairings on there really does add a lot to the airplane, and not doing it would just be silly. I do have some filler I just put on in a couple areas that I wasn't too happy about, but we'll get back to those. But my project for yesterday and a decent part of the day... watching the 1991 Reno Air Races. Looking at a whole lot of nothing right now. This is rather disappointing. Anyways, you get the gist. Love watching air races. I think it was Friday night I glued the stab on. I already had the fin in place, so I glued on the stab. And then once the stab is glued on, this whole area up here was blank. And the fuselage stopped right here, and of course the fin came down to it. So now I had to fill all this area in to where everything kind of blended together. And that was a little bit of a chore, once again, because I have nothing to go by. There's nothing on the plans that say, cut this part out and glue it onto here. There's nothing like that. So what I did, which is pretty much the same way I do it on most of my airplanes, I did it on this Zeroli Bearcat, is this portion up here that goes over the stab, I planked. I just cut some strips of 1/8 inch balsa, laid them on there. This center one here goes right to the tip of the vertical. The second one on either side blends into the fin and goes to about right here. And then there's one on each side that stop at the trailing edge of the stab. And of course a little scabby up here. So that took care of that situation. Now for this portion here, I was trying to figure out the best way to do it. And I decided just to basically cut one piece of balsa, glue it to the fuselage, because once again, there's like a little shelf in here and then the fin goes up. So behind this, there's actually quite a bit of empty space. Focus. So I glued this piece on there, kind of pushed it into place, glued it around. Then once I did the other side, just took some filler and some wood and just kind of, boogered it all up in there, sanded it smooth. Now the fin blends into the fuselage and everything just fine. Now, because there's quite a bit of filler up in this area here, this has all been hardened with CA. And this is not as smooth as I would have liked. It really isn't. I'm not disappointed in it, but overall I'm not extremely happy. But every time I try to keep going in and try to smooth it out a little bit more, add a little bit more filler, try to blend, I end up making things worse. So you just have to find a point to where you go, you know what, it's going to look just fine. Let's call it a day. So that's that. Of course, filled in all this area here. Now, if the filler I'm using for stuff like this, that's going to get covered, this is my primary filler. I use the 3M high strength large hole repair. This is a fiber reinforced spackle, so it's not a lightweight vinyl spackle. It is very light. It feels like this is empty. But this dries very hard, and it's about the same consistency as a good lightweight contest grade balsa. So it sands beautiful, covering sticks to it. Love that stuff. So this is all done up here, and also all the way around the stab is an epoxy and micro balloon fillet, all the way around top and bottom. So not only cosmetically does that make it look really nice, but it's also structural. This is going to make it nice and strong all the way around. So we're going to be good to go there. And it just looks good. It looks good. Once again, I'm not extremely pleased. It could be better, but it's going to look just fine. Once again, a couple areas where I applied some more filler. But, yeah, as you can see, everything transitions into the fuselage. It's a nice straight line. Everything just looks good. It's even on both sides. It's not easy to do, but it's not hard to do either. You just have to be a little creative, especially when the plans that you're using don't give you anything to go by. You just have to look at it and go, okay, well, that all has to be filled in somehow. What's the best way to do it? So, yeah, just had to be a little creative. No big deal. Let's get try to get some better lighting of this thing here. Yeah, that's better. So once again, looking at the wing fairings from the bottom, you can see how it's just spackle with just one layer of glass cloth and resin on the bottom. And it fits the wing just perfect. It's probably not necessary because it already fits the wing very well. I may smear on some epoxy resin and micro balloons on here and then bolt the wing on with some wax paper in between, and just make one final perfect fillet in there. But I don't think it's going to be necessary because it's pretty good. Now, the reason I use so much glass cloth on this is because this area is going to be covered. And as you can see, it's, you probably can't see it, to be honest with you. I think this side got a little thinner on me than the other side. But I can move it a little bit. It's a little flexible, but not really. But I wanted to make sure there was plenty of glass, especially on at least one side, to where heat wouldn't, start to warp it and twist it and stuff like that, because it fits the wing perfect. Once I apply covering, I don't want it to start, curling or anything like that. But yeah, this all turned out really good. Once again, everything blends in nice. This is just about ready for final sand. Just about. And I'm getting ready, getting closer and closer to being able to mount the wing, or not the wing, mount the engine, which I think I know how I'm going to do it, because I know I covered it in the last video that the 55RA will fit in the confines of that engine box just fine, assuming the engine is straight. But I need right thrust. I mean, I don't need it, but I want right thrust, which means I have to offset the engine to this side a little bit. So I'm going to have to get kind of creative, and I'm pretty sure I know how I'm going to do it, and it'll work just fine. Got a brand new DLE 55RA sitting up there. Got all my servos for it. The servos in the tail, the Pro model are 205s. These are a digital mini servo. Very, very impressed with these servos. I have these in the tail of my Goldberg Sukhoi, and you might be thinking, well, that's not a really good comparison. Actually, it kind of is, because the tail section of this airplane, even though this plane is much larger than a Carl Goldberg Sukhoi, the cap has a very small tail section. So the control surfaces are just a little bit bigger. And this airframe is actually going to be smoother than the Sukhoi. And what I mean by that is, the Sukhoi is very lightly built, stick construction. There it is back in the corner. And that Sato 150 rattles the daylights out of it. And I've had zero problems with those servos. So this is going to be a much smoother setup, having the DLE 55 up in the front with a 3-blade carbon prop. Of course, the whole airplane is solid. It's going to be a pretty smooth airplane. Pretty excited. And I am pretty sure that this is what it's going to look like right here. I can't think of any other scheme to go with. When I think of a Cap 21, that's what pops in my head. But I don't know. There's a few color schemes I kind of like. Hold on. Take a sip of coffee here. But chances are, that's what it's going to look like. Now, last night, while I was waiting for the final layer of filler to dry on the fairing and on the tail section, believe it or not, I decided to work on the T6. Now, I haven't gone over too much with this airplane other than the fact that that it was crashed on its last flight. I redid everything that needed to be done on the center section, got the gear mounted back up, which I still need to go in and further reinforce. I just have to figure out how. But the only other real damage, and it might be kind of hard to see, was the bottom of the rudder got peeled open like a can of sardines. So you can see one side, I was able just to kind of glue the composite material back together, but this side, most of it was gone. So I just kind of cut some straight lines and shoved a balsa wood block in there, sanded it to shape, sealed it with some CA, made sure I had a good exit for the tube for my hinge pin, if this thing will ever focus. There we go. And a couple layers of Bondo, and good as new. Now I just need to find some paint that'll match close as possible. And I'm going to use the top of this pinking line right here is where I'm going to tape it off and paint the bottom. So even if whatever paint I use is not a perfect match, it's not going to be in a very visible spot anyway. But that turned out really good. Nice and solid. I do have... Boy, this thing does not focus for nothing, does it? Maybe if I hold real still. There we go. Yeah. Ugh. I think I gulped that coffee a little too fast. I do have the engine for it. I need I need 4 servos, because the elevators and rudder servos, not elevators and rudders, the elevators and the aileron servos got blown out in the crash. So I'm going to put probably Pro Model or 270s in it, because they're at 6 volts or 6.6 volt, which is what I run. They're around 220 ounces of torque, which is plenty. I mean, this is a huge airplane, but the control surfaces are not that big. And I know that everybody has to have, 3 million ounces of torque on a 40 size trainer now. I've been doing this a long time. You don't need all that servo power. You really don't. The only time you need extreme torque from servos is when you're flying these modern flippity-floppity 3D airplanes where, the aileron is half of the wing area. Yeah, then you need a lot of power in a servo. But for scale airplanes like this, even the big Hostetler Chipmunk, that doesn't have anything special for servos in it. It really doesn't. They're really nice high-techs, but, they're nothing special. They make sense for that size airplane, and that does have good size control surfaces. But yeah, this does not need, 400 or 500 ounce torque servos on the controls. It does not need it. So, Pro Model or 270 is probably what I'm going to go with. The rest of the servos are fine. I still have to gut the inside of the airplane and kind of redo it to my liking, and we'll get into that as soon as we get into winter. But for now, I think that'll just about do it. This thing is really coming together well, and it looks like a Cap 21. That's, I guess, that's a successful thing. My goal is to probably start covering it next month, which will be December. Haven't decided what covering I'm going to use. I'd like to use monocoat, but damn, that just irks me. The miserable world we live in, where somebody would discontinue monocoat. Ugh. What'll they think of next? Now I have a bunch of Ultracoat left over from when I redid the covering on the Hostetler Chipmunk, so I'll probably be covering this in Ultracoat. And because I know how to cover, unlike a lot of these ARF manufacturers, I can make Ultracoat look good and last a long time. So, until the next time, I'm going to keep plugging away at this thing. All right, later.